Good evening and welcome to a special meeting of the Council of the City of Long Beach held Tuesday, November 30th, 2011 at 5 p.m. We'll have a roll call. Councilmember Fagan.
Present.
Councilmember Goodman.
Present.
Councilmember McLaughlin.
Here.
Councilmember Torres.
Present.
President Sofield.
Here.
Let the record indicate the presence of City Manager Charles Theophan and Corporation Counsel Corey Klein. We'll now have a salute to the flag.
Ms. Clausen, would you please lead us?
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item this evening is a resolution delegating to the City Controller of the City of Long Beach, Nassau County, New York, the power to authorize the issuance of and to sell not exceeding $1,750,000 tax anticipation notes of said city in anticipation of the collection of taxes levied or to be levied for the fiscal year of said city, which commenced July 1st, 2011.
Mr. Theophan?
Yes. Mr. Theophan, I just have a point of order. A question. I first of all, would like to make a motion right now that we vote on these two items separately.
Okay, I'll give you an opportunity. You want to vote on them separately?
Separately.
We'll do that. We won't make an application for block vote.
Very good.
Okay?
Thank you.
Mr. Theophan?
Yes. This first resolution deals with what's called a tax anticipation note, which is exactly what it sounds like. When a municipality runs into what's called a cash flow problem, is that it is a stopgap measure to get you from the point that you're at to the next time that you receive taxes. City of Long Beach receives their real estate taxes on the 1st of January and on the 1st of June of each year. In January of this year, we anticipate bringing in close to $18 million in real estate taxes. So this is a vehicle to get us from today till then. And, you know, the idea being that we have a cash flow problem that was created by Tropical Storm Irene and the outlay of monies that we had to use in manpower, in overtime, materials, certain contractors that we had to hire to fix certain damage that was done by the storm. I mean, just relocating lifeguard headquarters cost us $35,000, the various cranes that we had to hire. So we had expenditures that we are still calculating that are going to probably come to, at the end of the day, because we're still fixing certain damage to the boardwalk and whatnot, of in excess of $2 million. That's money that we anticipated having in our coffers that we don't have here today because of that unanticipated event. We will be reimbursed by FEMA for those expenditures, but we will not get that money until sometime next year. So this is what we need to do so that we can meet our obligations, to meet our payrolls for the month of December until we get the tax revenue in January 1.
What is this instrument called?
A tax anticipation note.
When do we anticipate getting the taxes?
Well, January 1.
Okay.
So we'll be getting them in the mail that day and, you know, the days thereafter.
How much do you anticipate we get in January?
Just under $18 million.
Okay. Mr. Fagan?
Yes. The $18 million number, I see in the that we have already in the revenue reports. We've collected over. I'm sorry.
I see in the revenue reports that we've collected over $10 million already. And with the $18 million, it looks like you're claiming that we're going to collect almost $4 million more than what was projected in the budget in tax dollars?
I don't understand your question.
Sandra, could you give us what was projected for the real estate taxes in the budget, please?
$27 million.
All right, so you're claiming that we're going to be collecting over $1 million more than what was projected?
That's correct, but I think that the many homeowners make the yearly payments for their, their sewer charges.
Right, in advance.
The January amount that we bring in is higher than the July amount.
Sewer charges aren't taxes.
No, but they're billed.
Right, but that's not tax revenue. It's not relevant to a tax anticipation note.
Am I not correct that the January revenues are greater than the July 1st revenues?
Yes, yes, they are. They're more
Right,
in
but
January.
sewer charges have nothing to do with taxes.
No.
No, that's
Thank you.
correct.
That is
Okay.
correct.
And you mentioned these unanticipated events that came up around the hurricane. I'm not buying it. Because after the hurricane, you continued to hire people, you continue with grade changes, you continued to spend as if we had plenty of money. Yet, at the same time, back in May, you were notified by the city controller that you had a cash flow problem then. Why are you using the hurricane as an excuse now?
Mr. Fagan,
I'm confused by that.
accept the explanation or
I don't accept the explanation. I'd like a better one.
Please don't raise your voice, Mr.
I'll
Fagan.
raise my voice because the taxpayers deserve to be defended.
Yes, but this meeting should be conducted with decorum. Please don't raise your voice.
Okay, then let's try some decorum. How about some truth, too? You hired more people after this money was expended, and yet you knew you were running out of cash. You're calling these unanticipated events, yet you planned on hiring more people, you planned on grade changes right before the election, you continued to spend as if you had plenty of cash. Doesn't make sense.
Mr. Fagan, we've let people go since
Who?
the hurricane.
How many?
All of the seasonal workers.
How many?
Oh, probably,
Last week,
Yeah.
3 months after the hurricane,
okay?
yet you're claiming that these were unanticipated events that were draining the coffers. You went ahead and hired five new firemen. You gave a lot of grade changes out to people that didn't go before council. You gave yourself a raise.
Oh, I did?
Yes, you did in May. Yes, you did in May. After the city controller told you we had cash flow problems.
Mr. Fagan, I got the same percent increase.
You got a raise. You're an exempt employee. You're not contracted. You do not contractually obligated for a raise.
Excuse me, Mr. Fagan, let me tell you something.
Please tell me. I'd like to choose for once.
In a letter who pointed out Section 19 of the City Code of Ordinances, where it talks about exempt employees getting the same benefits as CSEA employees. Am I correct?
I'm talking about...
Excuse me, didn't you point that out in the letter?
This has no relevance to what we're talking about here. You took a raise knowing that the city had cash flow problems. You continue to be reckless with the taxpayers' money.
Okay, that's your opinion, Mr.
It's my opinion. In October...
Mr. Fagan, Mr. Fagan, let's just try to tone this down a little bit.
Okay, I'll gladly tone it down. In October, you sent out a very expensive glossy 4-color mailer to the citizens of the city, and I'm quoting here. Right before the election, coincidentally, October 2011, even in this era of economic uncertainty, while the federal government's bond rating has been downgraded, we're proud to say that our city's finances are in order. 3 weeks later, you can't make payroll.
3 weeks...
3 weeks later, you can't make payroll. Please. You said I was in fantasy land when I warned about this. Please, explain. It's not funny, Mr. Theophan. In 5 weeks, you'll be gone. The citizens are going to be here. Please explain to us. And don't tell us it was the hurricane.
Mr. Fagan, you are free to vote against this resolution if you so choose. Okay? That's simple. I've given an explanation. If you reject it, that's your right.
I'm free to vote against this, but what I'm also is obligated to protect the taxpayers from your reckless spending, and there's still 5 weeks left of you. And we need to make certain that the taxpayers are protected here from the reckless spending. The city controller is claiming that we only need $1.3 million. Why are we borrowing $1.7 million?
No, we need $1.7 million to make...
Where does it say that? What memo to the city shows $1.3 million?
We are asking for the note for $1.7 million.
Why? Because the detailed explanation right here shows $1.3 million. Are you planning to write a check to yourself?
Ms. Clausen.
You know, Mr. Fagan,
It's a simple question.
you're a pillar of honesty and integrity.
We try our best.
I'm very glad.
I asked you a question. I didn't
preach
expect.
to me.
If you want to go that personal,
January 1, you'll see how hard this job is. That's all.
It's even harder when you're honest with the public.
Ms. Clausen, you were leaning in, did you want to say something?
Yes, you know what, 1.3 is to make payroll, but an extra 400,000 is going to be used for vendor payments, to pay vendors that we're obligated to pay. That's why.
Where are the details on that, and does that include any personal payments that will go to Mr. Theophan?
No, it does not include.
Wait, excuse me, Mr. Fagan, are you saying that I'm not entitled to be paid for my accrued vacation time? Is that what you're saying?
Don't put words in my mouth. I asked if it included any personal payments. It's a yes or no.
The answer is no.
There you go. Thanks. Remember.
You finished, Mr. Fagan?
For now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yeah, Charles, I just have a couple of questions. On this note, it's not to exceed 1.75, right?
That's correct.
And if it does come out to be a lower amount, we just draw off of that, and it's whatever we use, correct?
Yes, that's great. And that analysis will be even more relevant to the next resolution that we go on tonight.
So it's always mentioned that there's back taxes owed by some entities to us.
Well,
how do we go about getting those taxes into our coffers? I mean, is that something we just have to wait on, or is that something we should be proactive on?
Well, that was part of the problem, that one major landowner in this town did not make their real estate tax payments, and between those tax payments and their bills for sanitation and water and sewer, it comes to over $300,000. Now, that will be the subject in the spring of the sale of a tax lien, and we will then recover those monies at that point.
And then we're done. We get paid, and whoever buys that lien has the responsibility of collecting that.
That's correct, yes.
And that could be paid before then, though, right, by the business?
That's correct.
And when do you expect the money from FEMA and the state? How should we plan on that? And can we use that money as it comes in to pay back some of this note, or?
Well, the FEMA money, although, our claim, and we're going to amend our claim to look for more money, but, I mean, I would not venture to say that money will come until sometime, maybe March, April, or May of next year.
So not until, but it should come before the end of the fiscal year?
That's correct.
I'm just trying to see. Oh, and how long is the note for?
Yes, the tax anticipation note must be paid back by August of 2012.
Now, can that be, suppose the new administration decides they, maybe with the interest rate or something, they want to roll it over. Can they do that?
Well, we anticipate that probably that note would be paid, but that the next resolution, the bond note, in all likelihood, it would probably be prudent. That note is due in December of 2012, to at that point convert it to do a tax anticipation note at that time, so that you're paying off the bonded note with a tax anticipation note that would then be repaid by December of 2013.
And do we know what the interest rate's going to be?
No, we don't. It'll depend on the market when it's actually sold.
Okay.
Mr. Torres?
Yes, thank you. My questions are really more directed towards our controller. First of all, what or who is the broker that we're borrowing this money from?
We have a fiscal advisor that we're using. Liberty Capital Services is the company's name.
Is that the company we've used in previous times that we've borrowed money?
No.
No, I can answer that. We switched financial advisors maybe about 8 months ago.
Okay, why did we switch?
Well, what we did was that Liberty Capital, Mr. Tanner, who runs that company, had done an analysis at that time that showed that if we did possible bond consolidation of our outstanding indebtedness, that we could, over the course of time, save approximately $100,000. Now, I don't know if that's really worth doing at this point, but I was pleased with the fact that he was able to do that analysis and come out with that option, whereas our previous financial advisors, didn't even alert us to that.
And at what rate are we actually getting this loan on?
We won't know that until they go to market. After the resolution is hopefully approved tonight, they'll go out to market tomorrow. It'll probably be about 3 to 5 days before they return back to me with some numbers.
Okay, and the second question I have are, what are the requirements that FEMA has for paying us what we're hoping they'll pay us?
I don't know if I really understand that question.
There are a series. I'm very familiar with FEMA, and I'm very familiar with what they require before they do a payout. What are they requiring the city to show, the federal government, so that we can be paid monies for damage?
Well, a detailed analysis, and to try to put as much backup and proof by having specific things that we can point to and photographs of damage and what was involved in correcting those problems and what was our hourly expenditures for our employees that did this work, what materials did we buy, things of that nature. And that's how they will either approve or disapprove of certain elements of the claim. The ultimate claim will probably be for about $2.4 million. Will we get 2.4? Probably not, but we're hoping as close to that number as possible.
Has that report been done, completed, and sent?
Yes, it has.
Okay, I'd like a copy of that.
Certainly.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Did you say that we were going to amend that, however?
Yeah, we're still working on certain things, and we will obviously whatever we can justify to try to get reimbursed for, we will put in a claim for.
When did the original report go out?
I would say probably within about 2 weeks ago.
So 3 months after the hurricane.
Yes, Mr. Fagan, 3 months after the hurricane. Okay. Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Torres?
That's it.
Anyone in the public? Ma'am? Ma'am, please, I'm sorry. For those of you that haven't been here before, please step up to the microphone and give your name and address, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, Hope Schaefer, 3 Illinois Avenue. What happened to our stellar bond rating that I've heard so much during the election? And how could this possibly have happened if Moody's gave us such a fabulous rate increase?
The bond rating is still the same. Our bond rating is still A1. Ms. Centeno.
Lucy Centeno, 164 West Fulton Street, Long Beach. I'm a little confused, and I'm hoping that you can fix that. I heard a lot of stuff during election time, and I get this text last night, there's an emergency meeting here tonight at 5 o'clock, which, by the way, doesn't make sense because a lot of people are either on their way home from work or they haven't gotten off from work yet, and so you're not giving the entire community a chance to have a say. The other thing is the Monday before Thanksgiving, all the part-time workers were fired. The other thing is that all through the election time, we were told, no layoffs, everything's going to be fine, everybody is good, the budget is fine, everything's okay. So my question is, who's the biggest liar sitting there? Because these games are over. Everybody's tired. I don't think there's one person in here who's willing to give you a lollipop unless they smack it on the top of your forehead. You used everybody as suckers, and I think it's wrong. And Mr. Theophan, I am so glad you're history. Because you're rude, you're condescending, and you're disrespectful to the people that live in my community. Not yours, mine. And Mr. Sofield, I don't know you personally. I have no axe to grind with you personally, but I think you lied to us, and I'm sorry, but I call a spade, and and you're a liar.
Well, that's not
And
true.
so are you,
Ms.
Ms. Whitney.
Centeno, that's not true. Anyone else? Mr. Son?
Hi, good evening. My name is Mitchell Son. I live at 787 West Park. Mr. Theophan, under the FEMA guidelines, will only be reimbursed for a maximum of 75% of the claim. I'm sorry, we are only eligible for 75% reimbursement of the claim. I was wondering if anybody called Charles Schumer or Peter King, because FEMA has accelerated reimbursements if there's a financial emergency in the community. So perhaps that would be a path before we went out and borrowed more money that you might want to consider. My other thought is, has anybody tried to call the vendors that we have obligations to and see if we can work out a short-term payment plan? Perhaps paying 50% on the dollar till the mid-January, or end of January. I think the people who do business with this city would understand. And again, that would lessen the amount that we have to borrow from a financial institution. And regarding the bond anticipation note, Corey, you would probably know this. Technically, bond anticipation notes can only be issued to resolve judicial claims and or pay off judgments and for long-term capital projects that are awaiting funding, long-term funding from a bond issue, but need to be commenced sooner rather than later. So you might want to consider that. And my final point is, in the covenants of this agreement, are we obligated? I mean, first of all, they should be open to the public to review before we sign off on any of them. But my point is, there are seller commissions, and then there are other types of payments. So the amount that we borrow is going to be reduced significantly if we go ahead with it. So I'd also like to know if a bond anticipation note from Liberty is going to bind us to issuing a long-term bond to pay for that. So, any answers?
No, the answer is no. This tax anticipation note is due in full in August of 2012. That's simple. This is not long-term financing.
So why not use a tax anticipation note if we already have one? Why are we paying double the fees? Use a different broker when we can go directly to a bank.
We cannot go directly to a bank. We are precluded by the New York State finance law from borrowing any other way but by bonding.
Right. So I agree with that, but the controller mentioned that we were going to go to a financial institution. It was only going to take a couple of weeks to get this thing tied up. I agree with your belief that a bond or tax anticipation note is an obligation that's a security, and it has to be cleared by bond counsel?
Yes, of course.
So we're going to be able to get that done in 2 weeks?
Yes, we've been working on it.
Okay. So why would we pay double expenses and not wrap this all up into a TAN?
Because you can't use a TAN for what we're what we're looking to pay off in the bond note. We've spoken extensively with bond counsel, and there are certain things that you could use the money in a TAN for, and certain things that you can use money in a budget note for. And this is the proper legal way to do it. But I asked the same question, Mr. Son, of bond counsel, and that's the explanation that I was given.
You know, frankly, I think that that's probably not the correct answer.
No.
Because, again, is this a budget note or a bond anticipation note?
Tax anticipation note.
Right, I know the TAN, but the ban.
The ban is a bond anticipation.
No, it's not a band, it's a budget note.
A budget note, excuse me, yes.
Okay, so it's a budget note, it's
Right.
not a bond anticipation.
That's correct.
No, it is not a bond anticipation. It's not a ban, it's a budget note. It's a TAN, is a tax anticipation note. That's
Right.
to meet the payroll and vendor costs. And the budget note is for termination pay that was not properly budgeted for.
Okay, so specifically that the budget anticipation note is going to be paying for the retirement costs of the 3 folks in the police department?
No, the budget note.
Right,
not
the budget note.
Anticipate.
Right,
Budget
why are
note.
we taking it down now if we don't own the money to the end of January?
Mr. Son, I'm sorry, your time is up, but can we get an answer to that question, Mr. Theophan?
Well, Mr. Son, what we're doing here, but that's really the next item. But the reality is, if I can, I'd like to give the explanation when we consider the next item.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sun. Anyone else? Next item, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
Good evening. Robert Piazza, 111 Taft Avenue, Long Beach. My question has to do with the tax anticipation note. The money is going to be borrowed to meet a cash shortfall for January or for December. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So is it perceived then that at the end of June, the city's revenues and expenses will be in balance and there will not be a further need for money? So we'll finish the year with that extra in the bank on hand, or is it anticipated that that money will not be available at the end of the year?
Well, I think that part of that question will be is how much we ultimately get from FEMA.
So it's possible if the city of Long Beach does not receive the money from FEMA, that...
Well, no, we will receive money, a substantial amount of money. We have ongoing discussions with them. They've been here, we've met with them, we've followed their guidelines, we've done exactly what they've told us to do. So there is no question that we will get a substantial amount from FEMA.
So setting aside the money that was spent on the Tropical Storm Irene, does the controller anticipate that the revenues and expenses will match at the end of the year, notwithstanding the Hurricane Irene? In other words, I believe the budget was $72 million. Was that correct?
83.
$83 million. Is it anticipated, I'll ask the chair, is it anticipated that the revenues and expenses will be in balance on June 30th of 2012?
Well,
for the fiscal year?
Let me just say this, that part of the answer to your question, because, the fact we're just entering December, we're still less than halfway through our fiscal year, and a lot of that is going to be determined by ultimately whether our revenues come in ultimately as anticipated. But if they do, I am hopeful that it will balance out. This is to, in a sense, in a temporary word, to make us whole for money that we had to spend that was storm related.
No, of course, Mr. Thief, and I understand the $2.4 million you said you applied for FEMA.
Right.
Okay, I understand that. Setting that money aside, are the city's revenue and expenses that were budgeted, are they on par? In other words, I guess we're almost 6 months through the year. Do we still have we only spent 6 months worth of the money that has been budgeted for the year? Or are we above that? Are there...
Sandra, can you answer that?
You know what, it's hard to project where we're going to be. It's a good possibility. We might be a shortfall in May or June, but it all depends on what happens with things that have to happen in the next few months. If revenues, I can't project right now. If revenues are coming in right now, they are coming in. Are they going to come in lower than expected? It could happen. I don't know for sure. Expenses could be lower than expected, but at this rate, just based on my cash flow analysis, we're possibly going to be at a deficit situation.
So in other
May or June.
So there may be the possibility that another tax anticipation note might have to be floated prior to the end of June to make payroll again. Is that what you're saying?
It could be. We'll know more as the months go by. I can't really project how much revenue is going to come in. I mean, everything is, controlled by the economy, sales tax, mortgage tax. These are things that are out of our control, and, I just have to wait and see. I can't even use last year's numbers because things have, changed drastically from last year.
Sandra,
Yes.
can we stop the clock on Ms. Piazza? You mentioned the things that are out of our control. Can we talk about the things right now that are within our control? and talk about maybe the 6 departments, the major departments of the city that are either at or way above their overtime lines already with 6 months to go? Can we possibly talk about some of the revenue lines that don't have a prayer of ever being achieved? And then talk about Mr. Piazza's questions about meeting our revenue goals, considering the woeful performance in the last 2 years where the city showed up close to $3 million short in both years? Let's talk to that now. Give you a real opinion on how, let's be careful here, how we expect to finish up the year and how the city will be forced to make up $1.7 million between now and the end of the year because we're borrowing to cover a payroll shortfall right now. Give an honest opinion. Tell us in layman's terms where we are and if there is a plan to get us the other $1.7 million without having to get to a place where I think Mr. Piazza is alluding to.
Mr. Fagan.
I'm asking Sandra, please don't.
Just a minute, Mr.
Could you please let her answer a question, Charles?
No, you didn't answer. You made a speech.
I asked a question, so I'm giving her an opportunity to answer.
You said
Mr.
something.
Fagan, let Mr. Theophane speak, and then we'll let Ms.
He's
Clausen
interrupting
speak.
a question.
The reality
Then you're
is,
interrupting him.
the reality
Mr. Theophane
is
speak, and then Ms. Clausen.
that she answered Mr. Piazza's question, and I don't know what part of this that you don't get when we said that the 1.7 that we're borrowing is going to be reimbursed to us, hopefully in that full amount, by FEMA. Money goes out,
you know what?
Money comes in.
Please, then you know what? Let me make it simpler for you to understand. Okay? Based on a 75% return rate from FEMA, since FEMA seems to be why we're in trouble. Let's go on that assumption. Okay, at 75%, it'll be roughly 1.7 million, remarkably, the same amount of money that this TAN is. That's what we're going to recover from FEMA. So let's say we recover that, if that tends to happen. Then how, based on 6 months left in the year, assuming that we're also going to borrow another $2.5 million, okay, what do we do, like I said before, with the things that were within our control? How did we get to a point where 6 of the most important departments of the city are now at or way above their overtime lines? How do we deal with that? How did that happen? Is that, if we have a blizzard, does that mean we won't? If we have a blizzard like we did the last 2 years, but we managed to make payroll then, what happens this winter? Are you saying to us that if we have another storm, we're not going to make payroll?
No, Mr. Fagan, after January 1st, when the tax monies come in, and we're on even keel, we have money that is budgeted for those things.
For blizzards and
Yes,
contingencies
that's correct.
and more?
Yes.
You heard the question.
Mr. Fagan, the answer is that we have a cash flow problem.
I understand.
That's not a budgetary problem.
I believe
That's
you.
a cash flow problem.
I believe that. That's the first accurate thing you've mentioned tonight. What I think we have was more seriously, we've had a spending problem for the last 4 years. I've been talking about that for 2 years, and let's go back to it. You considered that fantasy. What we're dealing with tonight, I think, is really very much reality. And it's in large part because of a budget that Mr. Torres and I were adamantly against last May that we thought was unrealistic, and now the chickens have come home to roost. What are we planning on doing, A, on how do we recoup $1.7 million that we're about to vote on between now and the end of the year?
I don't know how many times somebody answered that question.
Well, what do we plan on doing about the out-of-control overtime? How did we get to there? The people deserve an explanation.
I have to disagree with your characterization of overtime as out of control. I really do.
Okay, 6 months.
Mr. Theophane has answered the question a number of times. We're going to get the additional tax monies after January 1st.
So
after that time, since you seem to be the idea man tonight, you and your team will have an opportunity to try to do it better.
Well, in response to that, we will do something about it because we will have no choice but to clean up your mess.
So you say. You're not being left with it. Let's make this clear. You're not being left with a mess. You're not being left with a mess. There's a shortfall. Wait, there's a shortfall and I'm not arguing that point, there's a shortfall, but that came about because of unanticipated issues. We're correcting those tonight. Then there's going to be additional tax monies that are going to come in. We're going to get the money from FEMA, and you're going to be back on track. So moving forward, things will be on track. And if revenues come in as anticipated and expenses are as anticipated, you will have a balanced budget at the end of the year.
Oh, that's very simple. But then again, let me ask the question once more, since it hasn't been answered. Where police, fire, sanitation, beach maintenance, a few more that I know of, are at anywhere from 100% to 225% on their overtime lines already. Let's back out maybe $50,000 to $100,000 from each department. Okay, and let's claim that that was part of FEMA. You'd still be at somewhere between 80 and 90% of their overtime lines now, 6 months into the year. To me, that's a mess. That means somewhere along the line, nothing was managed, the money was spent recklessly, and the citizens here are going to have to pay for this when our team gets into place.
Mr. Fagan,
that's a mess.
We had a hurricane that devastated much of the East Coast. Our workers did an outstanding job cleaning up this city.
We have no argument with
that doesn't come free. That has a price attached to it. Unfortunately, we're paying that price. Our workers did a great job. And the issues that you're talking about with overtime, with sanitation and highway and these various departments, that's where the lion's share of that overtime went. And you yourself sat there and said what a great job they did. And I think we can agree that they did a great job. And if they did that job and they worked overtime, they get compensated for it.
We were at 65% of the overtime lines 6 weeks into the year before the hurricane came. Explain how that got out of control then.
No, that's not.
Explain how that got out of control then.
Because it's not an accurate statement.
Well, they're accurate statements because it wasn't managed.
Mr. Torres, hold on. We're getting, this has now become a budget hearing, and that's not what we're here to talk about. And I've let it get a little far afield because, as a courtesy to the people sitting here, let's bring it back to the point we're talking about, which is this tax anticipation note. Mr. Piazza, you still have some time. Do you wish to continue?
Yes, if I can just go back to my original question to Ms. Clarkson, to you, of course, Mr. Sofield. Setting aside the $2.4 million that we've spent, according to Mr. Theophan, on storm-related issues, do you anticipate that at the end of the year, on June 30th of 2012, the city will have its revenues and expenses balanced, of course not counting that $2.4 million? So we'll only go over by the $2.4 million. Is that what's anticipated at this point?
And she did answer that and said...
I'm sorry.
No, she did answer that, and Sandra, correct me if I'm wrong, that you indicated that that will to a large part depend on whether our revenues come in as anticipated and whether our expenditures end up being less than anticipated or more than anticipated. Being only 5 months into the budget year, it's still too early to tell. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
So if the mortgage revenues come in and what was the other one?
Sales tax?
And the sales tax come in as budgeted, will then our revenues and expenses balance at the end of June on this year's budget?
Depends on expenditures.
And taking into account the FEMA money.
No, I'm setting aside, I'm agreeing that if the FEMA doesn't pay the money, you're going to be short somewhere between $1.8 and $2.4 million.
Correct.
One last question.
Mr. Piazza, I'm sorry. I know you stood there for a long time. Your time is up. The buzzer just went off. So if you want to wait, I'll be happy to talk to you at the end. Anyone else? Next item, please.
Item 2 is a resolution authorizing the issuance of budget notes not exceeding $2.5 million for the City of Long Beach, Nassau County, New York, to pay termination costs of the city employees for which an insufficient provision was made in the annual budget of said city for the current fiscal year, and delegating to the city controller the power to fix the details, forms, and contents thereof, and to sell the same.
Mr. Tiffin?
Yes. What this bond note is for is to pay for the retirement benefits that are due and owing to employees that are leaving the city service. Now, let me just say this, that primarily, the vast majority of this sum is allocated for the retirement benefits of possibly 4 members of our police department, one of which has already left, the other 2 of which have indicated to me the likelihood of filing their papers within the next week or 2. One more that had told me of possibly filing certainly by the middle of the month of December. And what we're doing here is we are asking, unlike the first item, where we will, if this resolution is passed, we will borrow $1.75 million for the tax anticipation note. The second resolution will be authorizing us to borrow up to the sum of $2.5 million. If those police officers are not retiring, this may well be $1 million or more less than ending up what we actually borrow. But we have to see what's going to happen over the next couple weeks, whether they will or will not. It also includes, there are, under the CSEA contract, CSEA employees are entitled, if they request to be paid for vacation time, they're entitled to be paid for 1 week of their vacation time. We've factored in a number of requests of that nature that have been made that we wish to pay. Also, some other employees in the uniform services have asked for some vacation payouts. And remember, every hour of vacation time that we compensate an employee for now ultimately saves the city money, because with each passing year and with incremental increases in their salary, those banked hours become worth more and more and more, and do escalate at times into very big numbers. So, like I said, we're going to be working with the Controller's Office to ascertain in the end exactly how much we need to borrow. I can tell you that we will not borrow the full 2.5, but we may be borrowing, in the area of, say, 2.1, 2.2, but we're giving a worst-case scenario to the council and asking for the authority to borrow up to 2.5.
Mr. Fagan.
Under the circumstances, we have one person that's retired, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. That amount is somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000.
That's correct.
The others are talking about possibly putting in papers, notifying us within a few weeks.
No, it's going to happen.
Excuse me, that's not correct, because there's a death benefit that's coming out too. The detective, Georgine Lee, passed away, and her family, while she was sick, she collected some of that compensation time, but her family, what is the time after his death? I think it's 30 days. They're entitled to be paid out for that. So that's
$267,000 right there.
And that has to be paid in what time frame? Within 30 days?
Yes.
Or 60 days?
30 days from the date of death.
Okay. So, from my calculations, there's close to between $800,000 and $900,000 that would be due by the end of December. Is that close, Sandra?
Well, except
that $800,000, Sandra, is that correct?
By the end of December?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, actually, it would be $300,000 by the end of December, and the other would be the end of January, correct?
Right.
So $300,000 would be due by the end of December, and $500,000 would be due by the end of January. Everything else is speculative. Why would we not borrow $1 million for now, seek some sort of cost-saving measures in the interim, freeze payments or delay any other payments for 30 days until tax revenues start coming in, and save the taxpayers the trouble, the anxiety, and the added expense of giving you a blank check for $2.5 million.
Well, we're not getting a blank check for $2.5 million. As I said before, I have been told directly by these individuals in the police department that they will be filing their papers. So since the fact that once after this resolution is passed, it takes, the process will be at least probably about 20 days until we actually have these funds in hand, and we're being proactive to try to give you the worst case scenario and to give us the authority to borrow as much as we will need. I prefaced all my comments by indicating that it's very possible that the final number actually borrowed could be more than $1 million less than what we're asking for authority to borrow. But these are contractual obligations. They are what they are. We cannot get around them. And I'll point out the fact that back in 2003, in another prior administration, there was, in the course of that year, there were 2 budget notes that were passed, one in August and one in December, very much like we're facing now, where there were unanticipated retirements of individuals, and the total of those 2 budget notes was over $5 million. So this is something that does happen from time to time. It's a problem that arises, and it must be dealt with, and that's what we're doing.
I'm not disputing the fact that it's contractual. In most cases, I'm not disputing whether we should pay the money. What I am disputing is the timing of this and the added effort that we're going through it here when, in your own words, come January, the city's going to have plenty of cash. Why would we go through this trouble when, in fact, you're speculating on 3 people who will not be contractually obligated to be paid until late January at the earliest, and possibly into February, when there are other remedies to pay them, and in fact, in addition, there isn't any conversation here in protecting the taxpayer dollars by looking for some cost-saving measures to offset what was not properly budgeted for. There are other remedies here.
Now, Mr. Fagan, what I've indicated is that I believe at the end of the day that 3 very senior police officers will be retiring. 1 has already done it. 2 have told me that they're preparing their papers. They've been out to Hop Hog. They've been counseled. They're going to do it, possibly a 4th. And that, along with poor Detective League's passing, brings us right there over the $2 million mark. So we are looking, again, at the worst-case scenario. I mean, I don't think we would be doing the new administration any favors if we would just say, let's just pay off the 1 police officer that has retired, and let's leave this problem to them then, so that you have to do a budget note in January or February of next year. We are doing this to try to solve that problem. Precisely that. We will not borrow 1 penny more than what we actually need to pay out these benefits.
I appreciate the favors that you're trying to do to the new administration, but be that as it may, you are offering here absolutely no alternative except adding additional debt to the city and stacking on more obligations, and there's other ways that this could be tackled.
No, I disagree with you. These are when you do have a change of administration, it does trigger certain senior employees to retire, and that's what we're experiencing here. And they are contractually due what is owed to them in accrued time.
So this was a possibility all along?
No. Well, then in 2003, under the Democratic administration, is what they did wrong? No, Mr. Fagan. Unanticipated events happen. Government must deal with those problems and must solve those problems. And just as I'm not going back in time and criticizing when Mr. Crystal was council president, and that council did what it needed to do, that's what we're asking this council to do, plain and simple.
Then since you're not going back in time, then let me go back in time. Since you prepared a budget in May, knowing that it was an election year, knowing that the possibility that there might be a change of administration, you budgeted for 1.5 possible retirees, when in fact there could have been as many as 12. And here we are.
So let me ask you then, what you're advocating for...
Not advocating, I'm pointing out facts.
Excuse me, you asked a question, let me finish. What you are suggesting is that when you prepare the budget, and that next year you can certainly participate, and we'll see if you put it into action, is to look at every possible person that might retire and say, we've got to put that in the expenditure side of our budget. So what you're saying is that we should have increased taxes for this tax year for any possible event that might happen in terms of retirement, to say, well, let's just say we've spoken to the department heads and they're telling us this many should go, so let's just double that to be on the safe side. You know what that translates into? Tax increases. We did not want to do that. The people of the city of Long Beach don't want tax increases. We've done everything we can to avoid that. I think we have a pretty stellar record in that regard. And now we have this problem that's come up. This will not be payable in the next fiscal year if you convert it to a TAN when it becomes due next December. And it'll be dealt with. When the coalition first came in January of 2004, they had to deal with the same issue, with $5 million in debt. They successfully dealt with it.
That's my understanding. When they came in, they had come in on the heels of a 25% tax increase.
No, Mr. Fagan. Evidently, you don't know the history.
Although let's go back to 4 years ago when they were dealing with an $8 million surplus, which unfortunately I still don't know where that went to, because there were no tax increases.
Yeah, but that's where it went to. We gave it back to the taxpayers in the form of every budget year, and you've been to the budget hearings. Every year we said that. Every year we said, instead of raising taxes, we're going to use some of the surplus money to offset taxes. We said that every single year. So every year.
I was under the impression it went to overtime and grade changes.
Then you were under a misperception, because every budget year we've said that the option was either to raise taxes or use some of the surplus funds to either reduce or freeze taxes, and that's what we chose to do.
I see. And now we can't make payroll.
One has nothing to do with the other.
Okay.
All right. Mr. McLaughlin.
Yeah, Charles, you mentioned that the employees go to HALPOG for a consultation.
Yes, that's correct.
Is that a state thing, or is that a...
Yes, the New York State Retirement in the section of the Controller's Office has an office in HALPOG, and any employee that's even thinking of retiring will go out there, if they're prudent, and have a consultation in terms of selecting various retirement options. They're complicated questions, and sometimes an employee needs to speak to a spouse, speak to their financial advisors to make the right decision, because once you do, you're locked in.
All right, moving on from that, do they calculate what the pension's going to be?
Yes, they do.
All right, so then, let's say I'm going to retire. I go down, I go to HALPOG, that person there figures out what my pension's going to be, or what my payout is going to be. Is that what they figure out, the pension or the payout?
Oh, no, they have nothing to do with the payout. Nothing whatsoever.
Now, how is the payout calculated?
Well, in the police department, the payouts, the timekeeper there is Lieutenant Dodge. He's in charge. He does those calculations. He's been doing those calculations for years.
Okay, and so he does that. Is the time limit for the payout is...
Oh, excuse me, Mr. McLaughlin. And for regular CSEA employees, that's done in the Controller's Office.
All right, and the time limit is 60 days after retirement, correct? And that's contractual.
For the PBA, that's correct.
What about the fire department?
You know what, Mr. McLaughlin, since we're not dealing with an issue of any firemen, I don't have that at my fingertips.
How long has this way of calculating compensatory time been a part of the collective bargaining agreement?
Oh, goodness, it goes back years and years and years. It's been passed on, certainly since...
So anybody who's on the department right now on both departments is entitled to this, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And let me just say this. In 2003, when a lieutenant retired and the city did not have the money to pay that lieutenant within the 60-day period, the PBA filed a grievance, and, so
Okay.
they're going to be very vigilant in this
All
regard.
right, now, if this money if we bond this money on this note, that's paid out by the comptroller, right? Sandra, you pay that out?
Yes,
So it all has to, it can't go out unless you sign it, right?
correct.
Okay. If we were to, we're putting this in one big note, let's say if we broke it up into two notes, what's the cost difference? And if you do that too many times, instead of doing it the one time in one lump sum up to, if you broke it up, does that affect your bond rating and stuff?
No. You could actually break it up, but, you would incur more commission costs, more
Right, that's
fees,
what I'm-
Right.
bond counsel fees. You know what, it's just, we're lumping this both together as one item, so it's actually saving the city money. By bond counsel, we're gonna make one payment to him for his fee and one payment to Liberty Services for their fee,
Okay.
and then that's it.
And now, right now, we're talking about the one death benefit and one person retiring, possibly two, it could be more, retiring. Can anybody tell me how many police and firemen have that are eligible to retire and would be entitled to a payout like this?
A third of the police department are eligible to retire.
So that'd be 25? Yeah, 25.
Out of 80, yeah.
Yeah, 25 in fire department?
And I think it's 8 to 10 in the fire department.
So
Okay,
about a third
35.
as well.
And those payouts are all fairly substantial, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Torres?
Yeah, Ms. Carlson, the questions I have are regarding the last 6, 7 to 8 years. First of all, have we ever had a tax flow issue like this in the last 8 years that you know of, that you've been able to report of?
Well, we're not, we're talking about the resolution for terminal leave. If you're talking about cash flow,
Yeah, I'm talking
that
about-
was the last time.
No, but I'm asking about having a problem with not having enough money to meet our obligations is the question I'm having. Let me ask it in a different way, Charles.
Right.
Have we had this kind of problem in the past, Ms. Carlson,
Termination,
that we didn't have enough money to meet our obligations?
Yeah.
not when I was here, but
Okay.
yes,
2003.
2003. I
Now,
would
have you
say.
notified all of the city council people of this problem before today, before this memorandum that was mysteriously out in the public in the last few weeks? Have you notified everyone here?
Well,
I'm asking her, because she wrote the
wait,
report.
in all fairness,
Yeah, Charles.
this is something that has only arisen after the election, and we still...
But wait a minute.
Listen, we are talking about the terminal leave. We're not talking about the cash flow problem.
No, Charles, I'm asking Sandra a question. Let Sandra answer that. When you wrote the memorandum alerting everyone to this problem, did you send this to everyone on the council?
I report to Charles. I make my copies and I give it to Charles. He disseminates the information. So I pass it on to him. You'd have to ask Charles.
Okay, Charles, then my question has to be to you. Why didn't we know about this before?
I'm going to tell you, Mr. Torres, because until maybe about a week ago, we did not know if we were going to be doing this particular resolution and if we were going to be borrowing this. But once it became obvious and evident that more than one person was retiring, we took a different approach. That if it was only the one person retiring, we might have said, we don't have the money, you'll either have to take a voluntary payout over time, or the next administration will have to deal with it. But instead of doing that, when it became obvious that there are more demands for this terminal leave, we said, let's take the approach of doing it in the form of a bond. And I think the controller will verify the fact that really, right up until literally Monday of this week, we were not sure how much we were going to be borrowing. Is that accurate?
We're still, even at this point for the termination, we're undecided as to how much.
I just said it could be
We're
$1 million
authorizing.
less than what we're looking for authority to borrow.
For the
So
termination.
you're saying the person that's retiring is not amenable to an incremental payout, they're insisting on a lump sum payout?
They have a right to insist on it, Mr.
I
Fagan. It's
understand.
contractual.
It's a question, it's a yes or no.
They request their contractual right to a lump sum payment.
Okay. Sorry, Len.
I have a question, Mr. Theophan. The police officers who are considering putting in their papers, can you give me an idea of length of service for these individuals? I don't want to know any names. I just want to have an idea, 20-plus years, 30-plus years, 35 years, where does it fall in that category?
No, they're big numbers because they're, both are here over 30 years. And, that I'm almost certain are going to retire. The other here has been here about 22 years.
That's the third possibility.
Well, right, possibility,
Right?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone in the public? Mr. Piazza?
Bless you.
Won't start the clock, Mr. Fraser, until I give my name. Robert Piazza, 111 Taft Avenue, Long Beach. Luckily, the question that I was going to ask next is relevant here. I understand you're borrowing money for cash flow purposes, and you're also borrowing money for unbudgeted items in the two separate issues. I guess I'm only talking about the second issue. What I don't understand is on June 30th of 2011, you had a cash reserve of $3.8 million according to the budget. You appropriated $930,000 of that, leaving you, what was the word, Mr. Theophan, I can't remember what you said, with a cushion, I believe it was. Why not use the $2.8 million reserve cushion to cover these expenses rather than going out to the markets and borrowing them and save that expense? In other words, borrow the money from yourselves.
Well, partially the answer to that is that since our auditors are still working on the final numbers for last year, that those monies are there in case, and there probably will be some deficit from the last fiscal year, so those monies have to be available to be allocated for that purpose.
Well, no, that's a cash figure, though, Mr.
And
Theophan.
also, again, you really can't use that surplus in this way, that an unanticipated, an unbudgeted item like this is something that you have to provide for at the time that you need to spend that money. And that's why we're looking to borrow that money for this purpose.
My question had to do with cash. Was there not $3.8 million in cash on June 30th, of which you appropriated $930,000 in revenue towards this year's budget to avoid a tax increase?
Well, that's, I think, a correct statement. But
Okay.
the reality is, like I said before, some of that might have to cover any deficit from the last fiscal year. And then the other answer to that is that you certainly don't want to spend whatever reserve the city may have. You don't want to then be totally without any monies that you can draw on.
But you're comparing cash, Mr. Theophan, with a budgetary deficit. They're two different things. If there was $3.8 million in cash reserve projected on June 30th, and you appropriated $930,000 to not increase taxes, there still should be $2.9 million in cash left. So my point is, not only is the city short 1.4 or $1.7 million, do they not have that $2.9 million in cash? Because that's 2.9 plus 1.7 is like 4.6.
Cash that is tangible that you can use. It is there to either be reconciled with your last fiscal year, or to be used in preparation for your next fiscal year.
I'm a little confused. Am I wrong, Mr. Sofield? May I ask you? I'd like to address the controller, so I'll address to you.
I think what he's trying to explain is that You're talking about a surplus of about $2.9 million.
No, I'm talking about not a surplus from the budget. That's what Mr. Theophan's confusing. I'm talking about the cash on hand
No,
of 3.8.
I think that's where the confusion is
Right,
coming
the
in.
3.8 is a fund balance number.
That's cash.
That's cash.
It's fund balance. That was what was there. Yes, he did appropriate 932 to infuse in the 2012 budget, reducing it to 2.7. Whatever is left at that point, if our auditors deem that, there's a deficit, we would have to take that money. So right now, that money is sitting there, not being used, but not being used in a sense that it's a fund balance. It's not cash on hand.
So the question I have is, so the money isn't really in an account, that 2.8 million? It's not sitting in an account as a fund balance?
No.
Can I ask where it is then?
Yeah, but, and let me tell you, I know that you have a very good grasp on our budget, but revenue is sort of comes in two big waves, and there are times that you have money in the bank, and then times that you don't. But overall, at the end of the day, that money, or a good portion of it, should be there. Some of it will go to pay for any deficit of next year, and some of it will be left, hopefully, to plan for the next budget year. I think that's the only way that you can look at that.
Yeah, but you're comparing cash to revenue, and they're two different things, Mr. Theophan.
That's correct.
The fund balance. So the answer is that 2.8 million is somewhere in funds, negotiable funds, in cash somewhere, or no? Because if it isn't, then we're missing 2.8 million in the fund balance.
No.
1.7.
No.
You're confusing the issues. Sandra, the $2.8 million exists, but it's not cash, correct?
Correct.
Can you explain that?
It all depends on the financial statement. If the financial statement says, hypothetically, if there is a deficit of 1.5, if there was, or even 2.7, that's where the money would be. It would have been gone, caused by the deficit.
But until we know what those numbers are, we can't allocate, we can't spend, we can't think of doing anything with that money.
Correct. So right now, we don't have financial statements. They're due hopefully by next week. He is still here auditing, and that'll only confirm whether that 2.7 is really cash on hand or no longer exists.
Sandra, as long as you brought that up, from the preliminary conversations with the auditors, it's my impression, and this came verbatim from the auditor, that money does not in fact exist anymore. Isn't that the impression that the auditor left you?
We don't know.
Excuse me, I didn't direct that question to you.
Mr. Fagan, let me just tell you this. This is why we don't release preliminary information, because things change constantly. And when the final report is done, it'll be public, and that'll be the end of the discussion.
I think I need to correct you. The reason why you don't release preliminary information or you don't offer guidance to the city, and it's been this habit, when the county provides ongoing guidance and the state provides ongoing guidance, is because you don't have a clue what's going on financially.
Well, that's your opinion, Mr. Fagan. That's your opinion.
My opinion matters because I represent the taxpayers, and I speak directly to the auditors who previously you had told not to speak to Mr. Torres and myself. The auditor told me specifically, we wouldn't do that because you're an elected official.
And not to speak to Ms. Goodman?
That's not what he said. That is not what he said. Please don't make things up. Okay? What he did say to me, and he relayed this information to Ms. Clarkson as well, is that the shortfall for fiscal year that just passed was going to be close to $3 million. So I think with reasonable certainty, Mr. Piazza, I could tell you that that reserve does not exist. Okay? And in large part, I believe, in my opinion, is the reason why we're here today in such bad financial shape.
Very good. Okay, that's your opinion.
But if the money exists, let's say we're $3 million short and there's 2.9 there, that balances it out. So that's a balanced budget for last year.
It doesn't balance the budget. It leaves you with no surplus and no rainy day fund.
Right. Right, because we
Well, no,
gave
it's
the
not
money
in our
back,
budget.
because we gave the money back
No,
to the
because the city
taxpayers.
worked at a $3 million operating deficit
That's not
without
true.
any restraint.
That's not true.
That is true, and that's
not.
where things
No, it's
are.
not. That's your opinion, and it's wrong. Mr. Piazza?
Yeah, I had one other question. You mentioned that, I think you said there was $28 million in real property taxes that were collected, Mr. Sofield, for the year?
No.
It's
One,
about 18.
18
No,
will
what's
come
the
in
total amount of tax to be collected for the year?
For the total year?
For the, yeah, the two
I don't
halves.
think we mentioned that figure.
Okay, was it 28 million?
About 30.
27 million. So what I don't understand, earlier you said it's 10 million plus 18 million. I was always under the impression that the real property taxes were split 13.5 and 13.5 if it were 27. Why would there only be 10? And the other thing the other part of my question is, generally the tax money is not backloaded, it's front-loaded.
That's correct.
Either the sanitation is collected all at the beginning of the year, although that may have been split when it got very high. But why would it be
Mr. Piazza,
10
to
and
answer
18?
that question, that maybe I'm mistaken to the extent that perhaps it's the July that's closer to 18 and the January that's 15, and if that's my error, I apologize for it, or whatever. I mean, however that's allocated, one either the July or the January is more than the other. But, I mean, we are getting substantial, you would agree we are getting in substantial monies as of January 1st.
But if what you just said is true, Mr. Theophan, if we got the larger portion of the money in July and we're getting a smaller portion in January, how would the city make it through June 30th? If you got 18 in July and 10 in January, or even 15 and 13, you didn't have enough to make it through December. It seems like if you're getting less.
That's tax revenue. There are other forms of revenue, and the reality is revenue continues to come in even after the fiscal year is over. So, that's all in our budget.
Thank you, Mr. Piazza. I'm sorry, your time is up, and I think other people want to speak. So what, all right?
Can't I ask one last question, Mr. Sofield?
No. Your time is up.
I'll pass it on to somebody.
Thank you. Mr. Banchik?
Stuart Banchik, 319 West Pine Street, Long Beach. Two questions. One is, what is the obligation of the contract to make the payouts for the retiring police officers? How much time do we have to pay it?
I think they said before 60 days.
Within 60 days of their actual retirement.
So why can't they wait until January? I mean, they waited 30 years. Why do we have to borrow the money if we have?
Mr. Banchik,
if we
we're
can pay
not
within 60
let me-
days?
I think I've answered that. I said that anybody that doesn't actually put in their papers within the next week to 10 days, we're not going to borrow for their money. That's simple. But for those
Even if they have.
well, why wouldn't we? That it has to be paid.
Of course.
So
But
what
do we
will
have to
the next
borrow it when the money will be
administration do then,
available
Mr. Banchak?
within the
What-
60 days?
What magic will happen that will enable the next administration to pay for an unbudgeted item?
We said $18 million
No,
will become
but
available in
that's-
January.
to be
You asked me a question,
No,
now let
Mr.
me answer.
Banchik, Mr. Banchik, please.
Okay.
That's for that covers payroll. We're talking about apples and oranges. Item one was payroll. So the first item was the tax anticipation note to get through payroll for the next month. The item we're talking about now is a bond anticipation note or budget anticipation note. And what we're doing there is borrowing money to cover retirees and their benefits. So I think what Mr. Theophan is trying to express is we borrow the money now to cover the people that are retiring. It's that simple.
But if you have 60 days to do it, why can't you do it in January when the money's available? Why do we have to
Because it's two different pools of money. That's what I'm explaining to you. It's two different pools of money.
May I?
No, let me just try to explain this in a rational way. The money that you're talking about that's coming due in January, the city needs to run the city, to pay people's salaries and to keep the city moving. The money to pay somebody after they retire for their payout is not money that comes from the general fund. So you borrow that money to pay off the city's obligations to those individuals. If the money came due in January and the city the new administration took I don't know if they can. Can they use general fund money to pay termination?
It's not budgeted.
It's not budgeted for, so we couldn't use it. But even if you could, you would be taking a $2 million chunk of money out of the budget to pay these individuals off.
All right, second question, this is more an observation than a question. I've seen this scenario played out on the national level when Bush became president of the United States, and he gave everybody back money that was a surplus in the federal treasury. How can you run a government by suppressing tax raise or reducing expenditures by using surplus money to maintain a government? Eventually, the surplus runs out. If your expenses are greater than what you're taking in, and you have to use this surplus money to pay the bills, eventually the surplus runs out, and then you're stuck with either reducing expenditures or raising taxes.
Or looking for alternative streams of revenue.
Okay, but you know what? It's been going on for a long time. You have weeks left. What are you going to find in the next few weeks?
I'm not going to be the one that's finding it, because I won't be sitting here anymore.
Of course not.
I won't be sitting here anymore. So it's for the new administration to find ways to do it. We had a plan in place. This was the situation that we're facing now was not completely unforeseen. We had a plan in place, and if any of the new coming council people wants to reach out to me and buy me lunch, I'll be happy to sit down with them and go over some of the details of what we were looking to do.
You know what, I'm not even referring to the situation now with the loans. I'm talking about just as a form of government, if you have to use your surplus to artificially reduce the cost of doing government because you're hiring more people, you're spending more money, you're not raising taxes, but you're using, a savings account to keep everybody happy. Eventually, it's all over.
Well, actually, Governor Cuomo just issued a statement that that was the better way to do it, was to use your surplus monies instead of raising taxes in these hard times.
Well, you know what? It didn't work on the national level, and it's not working here. I don't care what Cuomo says. It's not working. It's not a good idea. It didn't work here, and it didn't work on the national level. That's why this trouble's in so much, country's in so much trouble. Good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Banchek. Mr. Son.
Mitchell Son, I still live at the same place, I think. A couple of points. You have a structural deficit. You don't have a cash flow problem. Because over the last 3 years, you have had a fund imbalance at the end of every year, which you had to tap into your reserve fund to pay. That's considered a structural imbalance. And what you're doing is you're using one-shot revenues to pay your general fund obligations. So I'm puzzled. If you can use the surplus fund or the rainy day fund to pay down deficits so you could claim that you don't have to raise taxes, there's no reason why you can't, using the same logic, use these funds to pay down or serve as a bridge loan for the next month. There's no legal prohibition against that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, cities in Vermont have already gotten their FEMA reimbursement started. And I am puzzled as to why somebody has not picked up the phone and spoken to Peter King. Because these emergency reimbursements are there for a reason. And this is as good a reason as I could possibly think of. I'm going to ask you if you notified any of the bond rating agencies about the material change in events which have been going on over the last 6 months.
Mr. Son, why would we do that? Are you advocating that they should lower our bond rating? Do you think that helps the city?
Mr. Son, if you have a financial problem at your home, do you call TRW and say, hey, reduce my credit score?
Are you guys
You don't do, that's not what you do.
Are you insane?
That's just not what you do.
Don't you know that you are offering securities in a public market, that you have a fiduciary responsibility to disclose material facts? You have a...
That's right, Mr. Son, and don't you think we've prepared the appropriate documents that are going to be given to the potential investors?
No, I'm not talking about the potential investors. I'm talking about the investors which you have withheld material facts that influence the benches that you have outstanding. You must be...
Absolutely not true, Mr. Son.
These are not material facts. These are clear.
And excuse me, who are we hoodwinking with regard, and you know something, you're not talking about anything that has to do with this resolution. This resolution, Mr. Son, deals with an unbudgeted terminal leave. More employees retiring that were anticipated. Just like the Democratic administration did in 2003 twice.
Looking forward, Mr. Thieffen. Let's look forward. Let's bury all this finger pointing from the past. For God's sake. I mean, haven't you any decency? Haven't you?
You know, Mr. Son.
No, Mr. Thieffen, don't be condescending.
Mr. Son.
I would strongly suggest that you retain a securities attorney and start putting away money for the potential shitstorm of litigation that is going to be coming at you for not disclosing material facts as to the current state of this city's finances. That's my suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Son. Thank you. Anyone else? Except Mrs. Tagney?
Good evening, Honorable Denise Tagney, 522 West Walnut Street, here in Long Beach, ladies and gentlemen. Just a point of clarification, I'd like to remind the council that the controller's responsibility, according to our bylaws, is not to the city manager only, but to the entire council. So if you look at the description of if you look at the description of he or she's job description, that is the descriptions. Thank you.
Ms. Centeno.
Lucy Centeno, 164 West Fulton Street. I have a question for Mr. Sofield.
Well, you just called me a liar, so you're going to believe my answer?
I'm hoping that you'll be straightforward to me now because I'm face-to-face with you. Okay. Your father is retiring.
Right.
You didn't win the election.
Right.
Okay. Nobody knew that he was going to retire prior to you losing the election.
I can't say that.
So, well, most of the people that I talked to had no clue, but
well, whether my father was going to retire or not is his business.
He is asking, or we're supposed to pay him $800,000.
No.
What?
No?
No.
No.
Whoever told you that lied to you.
Okay.
500,000.
Okay, 500,000. If I'm not mistaken, several years back, when Gene Camerata left the city, he left the city in a ditch because he accrued a lot of money. Then I was on the understanding that the contracts were renegotiated, so that anyone that was working for the city of Long Beach, the contracts were supposed to be ratified to a condition where if you didn't take your vacations and all your sick days, they wouldn't roll over. So I am asking you, because I don't know, so I'm asking, did your father receive a salary the entire time that he has been with the police department?
Was my father being paid when he was working as a police officer? Well, he wasn't doing it for free, Miss Centeno.
Okay, wait. Was he being paid as police commissioner?
No, as a detective lieutenant.
Okay, acting police commissioner, though.
Detective lieutenant.
Okay. So my question to you is, if we owe him all of this money, how did this large lump sum accrue?
He earned it. He's been working for the city for 33 years.
Okay.
He's earned it over the course of that time. The other 25 police officers that Mr. Theophan told you could retire today, some of them are entitled to a lot more than that. And in fact, one of the budget anticipation notes that happened right before I came into office was to pay a retiring police officer something like $700,000 or $800,000. So they accumulate this money over the time. They earned it.
It's accumulated sick time and vacation time that's not taken.
Okay, so we still pay for people that don't take vacation and sick days?
Yes.
That's correct,
Okay, all
according to the contracts.
right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Hodge.
James Hodge, 95 East Fulton Street, right here in Long Beach, New York. I didn't know necessarily that I was going to speak, but after sitting down, I figured that I would like to just say a few things. A lot of this, I just want to really, and I wasn't told, and I'm not speaking I'm speaking as an independent taxpayer and resident, not speaking on behalf of the CSEA. But I would not like us to get lost in speaking about the work that was done during Hurricane Irene. And everybody knows CSEA did a great job, and they did a wonderful job. But let's not play Democrat, Republican over the CSEA backs and that it was all during the hurricane. There was some mismanagement, and I think that needs to be admitted. I would just say to the Republicans and the Democrats, the residents and taxpayers of the city of Long Beach get very tired of any party. Any party coming in blaming the other. I think and even for the new guys that's coming in, you may disagree, but if you constantly work together and you meet together, we can accomplish a lot of this, because I pray that this don't happen in the next 2 years. And we can say some great things, and we can vote for different people, and they can say they're going to change, but it seems like it just keep happening. I pray that we continue, or we just look to work together, even though it's going to be a 4-to-1. I pray that John McLaughlin can work with you guys. I pray that you can work with the 3 different unions and work together on some things that will help this city out, because it's all of our problem. I know I just came back to work and you gave me some money. If you want to buy, I won't take no interest on it, but if you want to borrow $20,000, it's not $2 million. But that's only to pay CSEA workers that's making under $40,000. I would do it because I care about these city workers and I care about this city. It may have been put out there that I don't, and a bunch of lies, but I just pray that we come together. And I think that we have a great CSEA president that will fight for any raises that is due to his members, and that's John Mooney, a great friend of mine. And I think that what we should continue to do, I ask that you ask all of the union presidents and their official boards to come together and talk to them about what can we do to help out in the next year. Just don't start cutting off of this department, cutting over here, but I think that they will be willing to work with you on different areas that we can cut. And I think they will help you save a whole lot of money. So again, I know my mother back there probably not happy because I said I'll let you borrow $20,000, but that's true. And today is me and my father's birthday, but I just wanted to be here,
Happy birthday.
And say that I'm going to continue praying for you. I love all of you. And let us just pray more, because I think as we pray more and we work together more, we can have differences and fight, but at the end of the day, I think a lot of this will be solved. God bless, stay blessed.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge.
James.
To the voting, Mr. Frazier.
There's a person.
Oh, is there? Oh, Mr. Gessler. Oh, I'm sorry.
And there's an additional
There's another person.
gentleman,
Okay. Mr. Gessler first, then I'll call that individual.
Good evening, Jay Gusler, 124 Taft Avenue, Long Beach. I heard Mr. Theophan's explanation, and it sounds, pretty plausible. It actually sounds pretty proactive. But my fear is that this kind of a blanket authorization to go up to $2.5 million is really with an eye towards spending that money, every drop of that money. The officers involved are well entitled to it, whatever the public or anybody may think about the wisdom of those payments. The bottom line is that they were achieved pursuant to negotiations. Nobody held a gun to anybody's head. They're entitled to those monies. I don't begrudge them that. I'm more concerned about other people who are going to be, in all likelihood, leaving employment with the city at the end of this month. And my concern is with that this blank check, and it's a blank check, no other way to see it, is going to be used to take care of those people on the way out the door. Can you tell me whether or not there is any plan for any of these funds to go to Mr. Theophan in particular, or anybody else that is on this dais?
I don't know. I don't know I don't know that they're intended to go to Mr. Theophan, but Mr. Theophan has earned money for his payout for when he leaves, and he's entitled to be compensated for the time that he's earned.
And on what basis is he entitled to that money? Is that, I heard some...
Accrued vacation time, and the code provides that exempt employees for those calculations are treated in the same manner as CSEA employees. So I would be entitled to my accrued vacation days and 1/3 of my sick time.
And I assume that you've...
That's all, not one penny more.
Okay, and so you obviously are in positive territory in terms of accrued vacation leave and such?
Do I have vacation
Does he have
time?
unused time?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, do you have any idea what kind of dollar figure we're looking at?
Yeah, in the area of about $50,000.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
Because I didn't take time off.
That was also
vacations.
not budgeted for, as you didn't anticipate the coalition losing this election day, so that will in all likelihood come out of this bond as
No,
well.
but Mr. Gessler, you can't budget for everybody that could potentially leave. There's 10 guys on your job that could leave.
I understand. I don't suggest otherwise. I believe you have to budget something, and I believe that an event like this past election day is not something that one anticipates or could anticipate. I don't think you should budget excessively, but I think you should budget something for it. And I don't think that you guys make a realistic allocation for this.
Well, I would respectfully disagree with that.
Okay. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Gessler. Sir? Just name and address, please.
Stuart Osno, 840 Shore Road. What I'm hearing here is the borrowing of $2.5 million to pay taxpayers and residents of Long Beach by borrowing for it. This is the time. It's not 2003. It's 2011. And we have problems. We have a city heading towards bankruptcy. What you need to do as a creative government, excuse me, is to speak to the people who are going to receive this money and negotiate with them and try and make the magic that Mr. Theophan is looking for, where people cooperate who have given 30 years of service to the city, and ask them to take this money over time, to cooperate with the way things are budgeted, so that things are done right. Because to borrow this money is going to put us further into debt. And it's a ridiculous thing to ask the people here, or the taxpayers here, to pay taxpayers and service people money we don't have, to have to borrow it to do it. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Osno. Mr. Frazier?
Item 1 is a resolution delegating to the city controller of the City of Long Beach, Nassau County, New York, the power to authorize the issuance of and to sell not exceeding $1,750,000 tax anticipation notes of said city, anticipation of the collection of taxes levied or to be levied for the fiscal year of said city, which commenced July 1st, 2011. Who will introduce and move the adoption of this item?
I will.
Who will second?
I will.
Ms. Goodman?
Voting. Councilmember Fagan.
Yes.
Councilmember Goodman.
Yes.
Councilmember McLaughlin.
Yes.
Councilmember Torres.
Yes.
President Sofield.
Yes.
Item 2 is a resolution authorizing the issuance of budget notes not exceeding $2.5 million for the City of Long Beach, Nassau County, New York, to pay the termination cost of city employees for which an insufficient provision has been made in the annual budget of said city for the current fiscal year, and delegating to the city controller the power to fix the details, form, and contents thereof, and to sell the same. Who will introduce and move the adoption of this item?
I will.
Who will second?
I'll second.
Voting. Councilmember Fagan.
Before I vote on this, I think it's very critical that the public understand a lot of what's going into this. Can everybody hear me? Louder now? Okay. I think it's very important that people understand what's at work here. I think you need to understand that when people put in 30-some-odd years of service to the city of Long Beach, I think they're very deserving, and there should never be an issue as to whether they've accrued time, whether they should be paid. Whatever's contractual at the end of the day should be paid. What I think is going on here, and which is really, really indicative of what's gone on here for the last 2 years in my experience, is that the periodic treatment of the taxpayers, one where everything is kept in the dark, nothing's explained, nothing is detailed, and everybody is supposed to just take a city manager's word that has clearly been questionable, and quite frankly, we were tired of, and we deserve better. You're faced with a situation here where we're going to be asked to make payments to people who are retiring. We've been provided no backup documents, no detail about, in fact, how they got to these numbers, in fact, if they are the numbers, and further, whether these people have put their papers in. Everything here is based on a lot of assumption, and again, we're supposed to be taking the word of a city manager we're supposed to take his word. Okay? Absent of that information, I think it's unfair to the taxpayers. I think it's unfair to council members being kept in the dark, because that's happened for the better part of 2 years. And I think it's a cautionary tale to all of you about what happens when you have an administration that's basically run amok and full of excuses and never answers and remedies. And with that said, I clearly vote no for this.
Councilmember Goodman.
I don't want to drag this on. No surprise here, Mr. Fagan. I disagree with pretty much every single thing you said and your every single insinuation. Thank you.
That's classy.
I wish you the best of luck, the incoming council, because once you're sitting up here and you're more in tune with what's happening and you understand more, which, Mr. Fagan, your learning curve must be exceptionally large because you don't have any idea. I think you'll hopefully get a clearer picture of what needs to be done.
Well, now I'll get the information, so I'll be able to have a picture of it.
She voted yes. Mr.
Councilmember McLaughlin.
Yeah, I'd like to, for this, so we need to have this money here, not only for this one payout, but we also have Detective Pacucci's death that has to be paid out. There's no getting around it. I'd like to see, going forward, if anybody who is retiring wants to negotiate a payout over time, I'd like to see that. But in the meantime, I'd like to see the money available for the comptroller in case we don't have that option. So on that note, I'll vote yes.
Councilmember Torres.
Hey, before I vote, I just want to make very, very clear a couple of things. One is that, as a retired individual since 2003, one of the things that happened is that, of course, I too had accrued sick days and vacation days that were due to me. It took 2.5 years for me to be paid that money. The City of New York required that I submit conflict of interest forms totaling something like 102 pages, and I've kept copies of them in case anybody wants to see them, that I had to submit. And it took 2.5 years for them to determine if there was any conflict of interest in my getting this money. They would have held the money from payment if they had found a conflict of interest. I'm concerned about that right now. I'm concerned about voting where there might be a conflict of interest. I'm concerned about spending when we don't have enough money to pay our bills. I have to say that if I ran my household that way, we would be bankrupt by now. I had to wait 31 years to renovate my house because I wouldn't put myself into that kind of debt if I couldn't afford it. This is what you can expect from us coming in to the majority come January. We will be very, very, very careful with public money. And you can trust that your faith and your vote that you've put into this new administration will live up to that. My vote is no.
President Sofield.
If my roof leaks, I fix it. If a window breaks, I fix it. I don't wait 31 years. And that's why you have all these infrastructure projects going on all over the city. And that's why I'm voting yes. Thank you all.
Who will make a motion to close the meeting?
I will.
Who will second?
No, it's not.
Who will second closing the meeting? Voting, Councilmember Fagan.
Yes.
Councilmember Goodman.
Yes.
Councilmember McLaughlin.
Yes.
Councilmember Torres.
Yes.
President Sofield.
Yes. Get home safely.